So hello everyone, I am Karolina. I support women and occasionally also men in connecting with something deep and real and untamed so then they can live and create from this space. And today I'm talking with a coach and author, Phil Goddard, and this is a part of a series of conversations called Creativity Cauldron, where I talk with people who inspire me, whose creations inspire me. And I want to learn about how they see creativity, how they create. And this is the sixth, I believe, conversation. A very warm welcome to you, Phil. It's wonderful to see you.
I always love chatting with you, Karolina, so thank you for inviting me.
And you are connecting with us from Bali, correct?
Yes, I moved out here from the UK. I moved out here last October. I hadn't even visited before. I just sold up everything and sold up, gave everything away, and just came here with my suitcase back in October. So it's about 6 months ago. Yeah.
That's a creative unfolding and move also. So please.
Just dived in, yeah.
So please tell us a couple of words about you. I know that you are a coach, an author, and just share a little bit about you, about your work. And it would be also wonderful if you could mention a few creations of yours that you really love.
Oh, well, thank you. I started, a study of human behavior quite a long time ago now, 1998, when marriage broke down. And I kind of looked back and thought, I wanted to understand what happened. And so that, as part of that exploration, came across coaching. There was been leadership roles for many years, and it was always that aspect of my work that I really loved. And I think I just love people. I love having conversations with people. I love talking about life, exploring life, and in particular relationships. I've realized that probably whatever my clients come to me for, we always end up talking about relationships, be it personal relationships or professional relationships. So I've described myself, I guess, as a relationship coach, but I don't even like the word coach, I have to say. I don't think I'm a purist coach. It was suggested to me recently, somebody said, oh, it seems that you're all about celebrating what it is to be human. And I have to say, yes, that probably is it. And, if you come and speak to me, I will just simply be helping you to see what it is, really, everything that it is to be human, the magnificence of all of that, be that sadness, happiness, whatever. So, and to me, there's, like I say, there's a magnificence to that, letting go of any resistance to that. And tapping into creativity, the flow of creativity, which I think is happening all the time. It just really depends how we tap into that. And it's funny, isn't it, being proud of our creations? I have to say, if I pause and reflect, I've recorded something like 75 episodes of a Coaching Life podcast, which I started about 3.5 years ago. Just talking to other coaches about what it's really like behind the scenes. So the whole premise for that podcast was really to have people get naked, if you like, come and get naked and show what it's really like to live a coaching life. So I guess I look back on that, and there's some wonderful conversations, and I'm still getting emails. Gosh, a few emails a week still that come from that podcast. And I published a fourth book last month in April. But all of my books really have been just bringing together stuff that had already been created, bringing together content that had already been created, and then publishing it in a form that was easy to read. So I don't know about pride about those. I feel like I'm really, when I look back on those, I'm like really happy that I think there's some joy in us being able to share whatever it is we create with others. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And You mentioned the celebration of being human. Wow,
Mhm.
it really comes through in your writing on Facebook. I need to say exactly this when you use these words, how it is to celebrate being human. Uh, I said yes, this is very much in what Phil is writing. I need to say that I'm very touched by the humanity of your posts, that they are so open, so real and raw, and there is no separation that this is the imperfect human thing that needs to be fixed, and this is the spiritual or or I don't know, or coaching remedy. It's all kind of together, shared with big love. I very often feel very touched by your posts. And I want to ask you, what inspires you and what happens that you sit and start writing?
Well, thank you, by the way. Thank you for your very kind words, because to me, it's very touching to hear that kind of thing from anybody who reads anything that I put out there. Yeah, so really, thank you for that. I I think the kind of writing that does seem to touch people the most is the most personal. So I had a very torrid relationship with my dad over a number of years. Like, we didn't speak to each other for 10 years between age 21 and 31 of my life. And they were some pretty tough years for me. And there's been some real transformation around that relationship in the last 3 years. Like some 30 years later after the original fallout, but we were never close. So that I know that touches people. When I moved to Bali in October, gosh, I found it was a real culture shock, and I was grieving things that I had lost, including some friendships that had, I guess, run their course, that had changed form and dissolved before I left the UK. So, but here's the thing, Karolina, is that I think the reason why people connect to what appears personal is that I'm yet to really to come across anything personal that isn't also universal. Like, whatever I've had going on, there's always others. We all have a version of that going on too. We've all grieved losses in various forms. We've all dived in and had things work out amazingly or things not work out. And so I think what I also see actually is when I talk about celebrating what it is to be human, the opposite of that would be to resist it, would to be resist some of what it is to be being human. And um, I think there's a real liberation for us. There's a real liberation to see that we don't need to resist any experience, even the most, utter heartbreak that, yes, I've written about years ago, few years ago in a after a relationship breakup, like in the fetal position, sobbing on the floor as a 40-odd-year-old man. I mean, blimey, as a coach, should I have known better and been more, spiritually enlightened and not felt those emotions? Well, here's the thing. What I see is that our suffering comes from resisting any of that stuff, and it hangs around. It's so cliche, isn't it? What you resist persists. But that looks true for me. So if somebody comes to me wherever they're at with any kind of emotion, it can be, what we class as good emotions or bad, or feeling stuck or whatever. Once we take away the resistance, life just seems to move and flow more, which is, I guess, is a bit of a segue into creativity. um, you asked me what inspires me. Life really inspires me, like the magnificence of it. Instead of resisting it, like, to be honest with you, currently I've had some stuff. It's not really all of my story to tell, but April was a pretty tough month for me personally as well, and there was stuff going on in that. And yet, I published my fourth book when I had this stuff going on. But it's because I wasn't resisting anything, and just really let's let it happen. And the creative energy, the life, creative energy, is just, to me, it looks like it's life energy
Mm-hmm.
that just flows through. That just flows through. And we've all got experiences in life that we can write about. We probably just talk ourselves out of it. But it is that real, the stuff that looks, and indeed is, I'm not saying it's not personal, but it's more than personal. It's things that are personal to us, that we feel in our hearts, touch other people as well. So what inspires me is just simply life, what we have going on. And they can be my own experiences in life, or indeed what's going on with my clients, which very often just is mind blowing. And I can take just a snippet of something of that and create something to write about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is a certain kind of feeling, something that touched you, either in your life, in the life of clients, in the world. Does it start with kind of a feeling, being touched, and then the words come and you start writing?
Karolina, this really fascinates me. The kind of writing that I find creates the most engagement on social media, in particular Facebook, um, that touches people, shows up. It feels like, I get it, I'm just telling a story here of just how it looks to me, but that's all I've got, right? That's all I've got. But it feels like it just shows up in me,
Mm-hmm.
like almost like somebody's injected that idea into me, perhaps a greater intelligence, and then it expands within me as I'm putting it out on the page. And personally, my writing often comes to me, I kind of write what I would describe in a circular way. So there's normally a beginning which links to the end. I might use a similar phrase to open a piece, and as I do to end a piece. But those kind of things that arrives, like the beginning and the end, seems to just show up as once. And then my job just seems to be to let that sprout out and flourish out of me on the keyboard. And quite often, that's at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. And I've learned, I've gone through stages of when that inspiration, if you like, shows up, and I can speak to that because I don't think that's accurate, but for linguistic simplicity, we'll say that when inspiration shows up, I've learned not to ignore that and to really just to write, because that's the best stuff. It seems that that's coming from, yes, so many people say this as well, don't they? That's not mine. That's just coming through me.
Mm-hmm.
That really does feel like that. It's funny. One of the things I do each day is look at Facebook memories. It shows you like what you put on Facebook on this particular day, last year, year before, or whatever. And I tend to look at that each day, just out of interest and my own self-obsession, perhaps. But anyway, there's some writing there that quite often I'll come across, and it's as I've described. It's like it feels like it's come through me, and I'll read it, and I will be, oh wow, that is rather profound. And I will even see something in that writing, which I posted on Facebook, but I will often see something in that I didn't see before.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that just feels like, well, of course, because it wasn't really me that was creating that. I was just tapping into this creativity and allowing it to flow through. And yeah, it's really really beautiful to do that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, beautiful and exciting also. It's very kind of enlivening, isn't it? To be in a relationship with this something that is coming through. It's very kind of alive and exciting. Mm.
And I love that you put that, like that being in a relationship with it, whatever it is. People have different names for it, spirit, God, whatever. And just being in a relationship with that. So allowing that to flow. I wrote a piece a few years ago about writer's block. It's like we are being creative even when we think we're not, because we create an experience of writer's block, because we're creating lots of other stories that we're perhaps thinking about other stuff, which means we are kind of blocking off, if you like, this flow. So it's a really wonderful game, and it is beautiful. There are those things that come through are often the things that excite me to, oh, I cannot wait to put this out there and share that. There are other things, like I might have an idea for something, or, I might have a conversation with my coach and we're like, oh, maybe it would be good to write something about this or whatever. And it becomes something a little bit more manufactured. And those things always die. They never, I might write something out there, but they don't have that feel. They don't have that energy. They haven't come from the same place, which is like beyond me, if you like. They haven't come from that place. And I don't know why I still bother in a way, because that kind of writing never gets any much at all. It doesn't get much kind of engagement. And maybe it's not, helping people experience joy either, which to me is what it's all about. I think that's why we want to do this, is the expansion of love and joy. So yeah, it's fascinating to see how that is all at play.
Yes, and I love what you said, that you learned when inspiration comes, you learned not to ignore it. I think it's very, very helpful, because I notice also when inspiration comes, it can be a feeling, a certain phrase, and I put it aside, like, oh, maybe when I have better understanding of it, I'll write about it. Then it often kind of fades away. But if I take action immediately and start writing, even though it's not clear to me what wants to come through, very often something very kind of rich and alive shows up. That's been my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I actually think it's always there. It's always available to us. We're just for the most part distracted from it.
Yes, and I also want to touch on something you mentioned about the very personal. It's also universal. Um, I think people need to know more about it, because often what I noticed stopped me or my clients or friends from sharing is that it's just mine, it's just very personal. Why would I bother other people to read it? And very often I had this experience quite recently in a circle I'm part of, that something came through me. It didn't make much sense to me. It was like a bit weird, but I kept writing because it was very alive, even though I didn't understand it fully. And when I posted it, a lot of people thanked me for it, and they said, like, it looks like you kind of removed a certain veil for us. And I was like, great. So it's not so much about me, I don't need to bother so much what it means about me. I can just allow it, because maybe this is even more for someone else than for me. And it's because we are all in it. So it's wonderful. In the personal, there is the universal. Thank you for this, for putting it so clearly.
Yeah, I see it over and over and over again. I think it also is very natural for us to believe what we have going on, perhaps only we can know. And I think there's an important distinction to make here, and that is the difference between personal and private.
Mm.
So we can have stuff that's going on that, is private to us, but what we might think is like personal to us are just experiences that we all tend to have.
Mm.
We all tend to have. And I think the reason for that as well is that, like, one of my favorite texts is A Course in Miracles, and it suggests that there is only one basic fear that everyone has, one basic fear, and that is like a fear of, am I loved?
Mm.
Right? The fear of not being loved. And it suggests one truth, which is that you are loved. There's a bird tapping at my window. You can probably hear that. Yeah, so I think if we all have just one basic fear, then it makes sense to me that all of our emotions, particularly the ones from which we suffer, can be broken down to the same thing, to that same one fear. And if we're able to express our suffering and those emotions in a way that we're expressing that fear, everyone is going to be able to connect to that. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I'm suggesting that there, like, it might feel that we have a very, and I believe, yes, we have a personal experience, but I've just yet to come across I mean, I'm, 51 years old, and I cannot remember speaking to somebody who's had like some kind of, I'm going to call it an emotional personal experience, because, people do different things, like Neil Armstrong went to the moon. Up to that point, nobody else had been to the moon. Yeah, okay. But what I mean about like emotional experiences, yet to come across anyone who's had one that is unique just to them, that nobody else has had. It's like we all have a version of, if we talk to somebody and we open our hearts and we reveal the kind of emotional experiences that we're having, everyone we speak to will be, oh my gosh, yeah, me too. Me too. The power of that me too that connects us. We saw that in a movement a couple of years ago, the whole Me Too movement. It really had people connect and realize that we're all the same. So it's like, I'll often, if somebody's talking with me and kind of fishing, they want, confirmation and validation that we're unique, which we are. And I will offer to them, yes, you are unique, just like everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Yes. So what I'm curious about is also if you have any routine, structure, practice that supports your writing and your creativity, because what we touched on, it's quite mysterious in a way, but also very simple, like something wanting to come through. Is there anything that is helping you to be available to it on a regular basis?
Whatever I answer to this question, which I will answer, I'll say again that whatever works for you. Okay, so if you're watching or listening to this, by all means, if you feel inspired to try something that you heard in you from this conversation, that's great. But I think that's the most important thing. I'm not big on structure at all. I have my routine is I wake up, I make myself a cup of coffee, and sometimes whilst drinking that coffee in bed in the mornings, I might write if there's something coming through, or I'll just be catching up on messaging. Most days I walk, um, and very often then ideas come through. So my phone comes out and I'm tapping away. It's if I look at, is there anything that I do to help tap into that creativity? It is just simply allowing space. It's really allowing the space. And this reminds me, this is many years ago now. I was talking to a coach about how, gosh, I want to write something, but I sit down at my computer and sometimes I'm like, oh, it's really not happening. And I would get up and I put my jacket on, ready to go out. I think, all right, I need to get out of here. I just need to get out of the house. And then I talk myself out of doing that. No, Phil, come on, you've got work to do. Get back to your desk. And that never worked out very well. And this coach suggested to me, well, what if that's actually wisdom telling you that you need to take a break away from your desk? And so I started listening to that. And pretty much every time, instead of sitting at my desk, if I just had this urge, right, I need to get out of here, go for a walk, yes, ideas would come through. And so I'd be tapping away, just writing in Apple Notes on my phone, which might turn into a Facebook post or a chapter in a book or whatever. It's just, I think the biggest lesson, Karolina, here is not to ignore that. The biggest lie I used to tell myself was, oh, I don't need to write that down, I'll remember. Because it seems to come and then go. So I want to say about allowing the space for that. What do I do to support the creative process? It is give it attention and allow it when it shows up.
Oh, wow, I love it. It's very loving and kind. Give it attention, allow it when it shows up, don't ignore it, write it down. I love it. It's so simple, but so essential. Thank you for this.
That really, what you've drawn out there, I love that you've seen that, because I would suggest, in fact, I did a Facebook Live about this just today, about like, how would you describe your relationship with your business? And if you look at your relationship with your business, like as if it was a romantic partner, are you giving it time and energy and focus? Are you present to it? Are you listening to it? All that kind of stuff. And in a way, I love that, like, you, what you've suggested here is the relationship with creativity. The same thing applies. Yes, you could, if you look at, what is your relationship with creativity? How might you approach that relationship differently if that was like, if creativity was a romantic
Mhm.
partner that you were really interested in, that you loved and cared for? Would you be suppressing it, ignoring it, not giving it time or attention, or would you, yeah, listen, all those things that you just that you reflected back? So thank you for that.
Yes. And also your example about sitting at the desk, kind of having the idea that you have to write now, that you have to be creative now, versus going for a walk and being available for what comes through. It's so cool in the analogy of the romantic partner, creativity and as the romantic partner. When we are stuck there, kind of wanting to have a great date, but maybe being very rigid about it and not moving, versus just going, walking, being free and open, it really moves something. And I don't know if it's been your experience also, but for me, creativity is kind of, I want to say, very kind of exciting and even like erotic. It's very, it likes the body, it moves the body, it gives the sensation of being alive and very much in the body. So to me personally, any kind of movement, whether dancing or walking, this seems to put me in a good receptive state to be available.
I think, I could summarize that fairly simplistically in that the more I engage with life, the more force, creative energy engages with me.
Mm.
So, if I am feeling kind of dead and all that like stuff, if I was in a relationship and I felt like that about my relationship, then, what am I going to get back from that relationship? That's the kind of thing like I'm going to experience what I'm creating there. Like, I think one of my all-time favorite quotes ever is Gandhi's, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." That just applies to so many things. It can apply in your work, in your personal relationships, indeed in creativity. So if I want creativity to show up for me in a really free-flowing way and have it be easy, then I need to be that. I need to allow that. I need to allow that ease. And yeah, I love the eroticism of it all. It's just like, I can be in love and really attracted to and looking forward to, like, come on, yes, like getting excited just about, yeah, hanging out with creativity. Like, as if I'm going to go on a date, but it's not planned. I don't know when it's going to happen. Like, this lover is going to show up. Like, how beautiful is that? And so there's a really openness and being receptive to that, like being willing to receive. I guess there's a feminine energy to that, like to receive that creative energy. Yeah.
Yes, yes, beautiful. You mentioned about your books that you took some of the content that you had. So I see that the content kind of flew through you at some point, but then you put it into a structure, a book. Some people, including me, have a little bit difficulty with that. Like it's easy for me just to write freely or do something creative in the moment, but when it comes to giving it structure, it kind of can feel like boring or effortful. Do you have any words of wisdom or suggestions for people who might struggle with giving structure?
I don't know that even the books that I've released have structure. So I was, for a number of years, wanting to write at least one book. Um, and yeah, I I don't know if I would describe myself as a prolific writer. Other people have described me as prolific in stuff that I write. I don't know. That's subjective, isn't it? But somebody pointed out to me, like, well, you already have written enough like I was expressing my desire to write a book. Like my first book, totally egotistic exercise. I wanted to get a book out there. It felt wonderful to have a box of books delivered to my house that I had written. Um, but I have a theory as well, Caroline, probably not for this conversation, but like I think we actually do everything for ourselves. It's just that's not necessarily where our focus is, right? Like, so everything I do is for me, but that's not where I'm focusing. You know, if you look deep enough into the reason you're doing anything, you'll be able to find yourself in there somewhere. So yeah, it was beautiful that I had a friend that was pointing out to me, will you have enough content there for a book for sure? Like all of your fed, perhaps in private groups. So I just realized, gosh, I started to go through this content and realize that there were some common themes. And some other books, like I know somebody you know of as well, Steve Chandler, a very well-known coach and also a prolific writer. He's written, published something like 35 books. I loved his style of writing, which was like short books of short chapters, might only just be a couple of 3 pages, and you could open any chapter and it would be relevant. They're not the kind of book that you have to go right the way through, like A to Z. And so I just thought, yeah, I can create a book from the writing that has already been created. So it's like, I don't know if I have said it on this call, it would surprise me. I don't know that I ever say, oh, I've written 4 books, but I've published 4 books. Books came about from me simply writing. I never sat down with the intention to write a book. That to me would be rather daunting, but I do write a lot. And from that writing, it's very easy to create a book. It's there's a shift there.
Yes, there is. I think you kind of uncovered something for me, because when you mentioned this very short chapters of 3 pages that you can open at any chapter and start reading, it doesn't need to have like super structured sequential flow. It might have, but it doesn't have to. What occurred to me was like, oh, I can write something like this and it can be fun even. So it's great that we don't need to have all these preconceived notions, what books should be like, what certain creation should be like. We can just do it in a way that inspires us, that is fun, and it's enough.
For sure, for sure. And if anybody like is resisting that, I would invite them to look. In fact, if I was coaching, I would be wanting to see, what is it you're believing? What is it you're believing to be true that has that, feel, where that's uncomfortable, that that you're resisting there, because there are no rules other than those that we make up.
Yes.
Like, so a thing that was really mind blowing for me, I read an article, a guy who published a book just to prove the whole #1 thing on Amazon, how farcical it can be. But he published a book which just had a picture of his foot. That was it. And I'm thinking, look, if this guy can publish a book that's just a picture of his foot, then I can publish all of my musings that I have previously shared on Facebook. And here's the thing, and there's occasionally I will think, God, that's a bit of a cheat, Phil. Come on, you've written a book, but all it is stuff that you've shared already somewhere else on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever, and in some coaching programs and whatever. But gosh, I've had so many emails and messages, and indeed people have become clients through discovering my book. And one of my favorite stories from my first book is somebody who they sent me an email and said, my friend started reading your book. She hadn't finished it, but she said to me, you must read this. I get a feel that there's something in this book for you. So she bought a copy. And it was the last chapter. So her friend hadn't read that far yet, but it was the last chapter in the book that really touched her. And she sent me an email and said, I think the last chapter in your book may have saved my life. And I'm like, okay, I don't care what anybody else says, including me, that my book's a bit of a cheat or anything like that. It's just beautiful to be able to create anyway. And we never know who and how that might touch somebody.
Mm.
And that's like an added bonus to me. It's just in this sharing, and it comes back to that Me Too thing, and us just, if we just share what's going on for us, we have no idea how that might touch somebody, even if it's on social media. I've had clients come to me that I weren't even aware they were following me. They never liked anything of mine. And then one day, somebody I'm working with at the minute was like this. I don't ever recall her engaging with me, but one day she sent me a message and ended up working with me. And it's like, we just never know. We never know who's watching, who's reading, who's touched by what it is we're sharing. And that's why it's a good idea to smile when you're out and about as well.
Oh, wonderful. And it really reinforces the idea not to ignore the inspiration, the creative spark, to listen more to it than the voice that is doubtful or telling you that maybe it has no sense. Thank you for this. It's so helpful. What else I want to ask you is, do you have an example or a story, either your own or from a client, where there was the resistance to creating or feeling uninspired or doubtful, and what helped? You touched on it a little bit, like going for a walk, for instance. Is there anything else that you found helpful when there is the resistance or feeling uninspired?
There, you know what, Karolina, so it kind of happens all the time, but I'm using I'm making up a story. I'm making up a story that there's something that I know. So I can feel like there's so often an urge in me that I want to write about something, and I might, as we touched on earlier, that I might try and create something, and it becomes manufactured. That never works.
Mm.
But the resistance that's showing up to me is also showing me that I'm believing something to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be that I'm believing that I can't write. I'm believing that there's nothing there for me right now. And the simple shift is, well, okay, but what if there is? What if there is? I have to say, in this moment, other than what I've shared, I can't think of a specific example of like perhaps something mind blowing where I resisted and dropped the resistance and something has showed up. But I know it kind of happens probably in small ways as well, very often. Like, a client that I just mentioned to you who, yeah, there was a lot. I think there was a lot of resistance for both of us, and I think that's not unusual, right? And this is where it can perhaps look challenging. Is that, oh, is this resistance a message? Is the resistance wisdom talking to me and telling me that I shouldn't be doing something?
Mm-hmm.
But in the quieter moments, if I can reflect, well, what is that resistance? Is that fear based? Like, is my resistance because I have a fear? Is it because I'm scared of something? Or what looks to me is how wisdom seems to show up. It's a nudge, like there's a knowing. There's not necessarily fear involved at all. Because wisdom in and of itself has no fear. Um, I can think of one example of recently of there was a video somebody wanted me to share with them, and I just felt, no, I don't think that's a good idea. So it can work that way, right? It can, instead of like a common story would be, hey, I felt to share this with you. This was like I'd mentioned a video to somebody and they were like, oh, please share that with me. But I remember thinking, no, it just doesn't feel like it's a good idea. This person asked me a few times and then they watched this video and they really didn't enjoy it. It stirred up a lot of bad stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's what that was. It's like that, in a way, that was wisdom saying, no, don't go down that. But there wasn't any fear involved in that. There wasn't any resistance as such. It was just a kind of knowing that, yeah, that's not a good idea. That's
Mm-hmm.
not a good idea. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I think it's related in that the difference here is to look, is it really resistance, which tends to be fear based,
Mm-hmm.
or is that just a wisdom that doesn't have a story? It's like, to me, wisdom doesn't have a story until we then create meaning, or it might give us a nudge and then the story unfolds. But in the moment, just that urge to either do something or not do something as a nudge from wisdom is, there is no story attached to that.
Mm.
Whereas resistance is all about story.
Mhm.
It's all about, oh, I'm scared of doing this in case that happens or in case that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. And I also found very helpful what you said, that the question that can shift things, like when there is this fear-based story, I cannot write, and so on and so on. The question that opens the other door, like, what if? What if I can? Or something like that. It's a nice way. I see it like a opening the door to something freer. So that was great.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think when that shows up, that I notice I'm telling myself a story. Oh, this isn't flowing right now. I'm gonna reflect. I'm gonna respect that, but
Mm.
still remain open. Like, so,
Mm.
here's the beauty of the modern day, that we have a device with us, normally in our pockets or our purses or whatever, that we can write on. So we're always able
Mm.
to write. So I'm always in a position where something shows up, I can write,
Mm-hmm.
and I respect that. And so the fact that I might, in any moment, I might think, oh, this is a bit yucky, I can't, this just not occurring to me. Like, okay, let's let it go. But then I'm still open. I'm still open to receive. Like, I'm not closing that off.
Mm, beautiful. Are you creating anything at the moment that you'd like to share?
Um, yes. So, gosh, you know what? I announced a new podcast in September, and then I moved to Bali, and it went on hold because of poor internet connection and stuff. And like you touched on this at the start of our conversation, my work is really all about, I think I use the term getting naked. It's like, let's show our hearts. So creating a podcast called Naked Hearts Podcast, where we explore the nature of connection and relationships, showing, what it's like to show your heart, show your naked heart with each other. So quite excited about that. That's still very early stage. I can't give you it's like I've arranged some interviews with people, and some of those have got rescheduled and stuff. I'm also, should I share this? Okay, I've no idea when this book will come, but so all of my other books have been stuff that I've previously shared. So it's 4 books, one of which is just poetry. But I am starting to write something about being a father and being a parent and being a child, right? Which I know all of us have been at least one of those. So it's the book's going to be called Fathers as Friends, because I had a shift in my journey as a parent, in shifting from being that authoritarian policing parent to being my son's best friend. And he was only 8 years old at the time. And I can't know any different now, of course, because it unfolded, but everything changed in that. And when I also look at it from the other angle of being, being a offspring, being a child, or be an adult child of my dad, I look at how my relationship with him has transformed through me seeing that differently, through me seeing him differently. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm working about that. I've been writing a lot on that. I'm hoping to get that out sometime later this year, maybe in the autumn. Fathers as friends. That definitely is a subject that's very close to my heart.
Mm, wonderful. Wow. And I want to say to you, thank you for not ignoring these impulses, because this touched me what you said about fathers as friends. It seems like a book that needs to be written, that it will touch the hearts of many fathers and sons. Maybe also.
I really hope so, because I think for both parents, it will be equally applicable to mothers as well, of course, and to daughters, right? So it's not just about fathers and sons, but my experience is only ever as a father and as a son. Um, I can remember the moment as if it were yesterday, Karolina, where his mother and I had separated, and so I was renting my own house, and I had my boy come and stay with me, and I just had this realization that I felt done with, all of the conflict that gets created from trying to be authoritarian and policing. There's a lot of conflict in that. And I just felt so done with it all, and just wanted to shift to being his wisest, and an old wise best friend. And I think the closer you look at that, there's somebody who's your best friend, you feel like you can be yourself with them, you can share and express yourself with them, that you're not going to be shut down, you won't be ignored, they'll have your best interests at heart. All that stuff actually that we want to have as a parent, we want to give that to our children as parents. But there's a different kind of trust with a friendship, as there is, like my father was almost Victorian in his in his views as a parent, very, very traditional, very, very authoritarian. And I think parenting anyway has certainly shifted in the 21st century. But yeah, just shining a light on that, the change in relationship, and have its focus be on one that is actually a friendship rather than any other made up concept.
Wow. I'm sure that moment when the shift wanted to happen in you, when you were done with the authoritarian way and open to the friendship-based way, and you followed it, it created a beautiful relationship with your son. Wonderful. Yes. Oh.
Yeah, it certainly has. He's in his late 20s, and he tells me now, "Gosh, Dad, you really are my best friend." And I'm just so touched like that a young man of 20 odd years old would feel like that about his dad. It's really beautiful. I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. And also it shows how we are creating always. It's not just writing, painting, creating programs or services. It's creating the relationships with children, with people, with life. It's creating meals and going about our day. It's all creating, isn't it?
It's all always like it's happening. It's always happening. Life is happening. It hasn't happened. I mean, we can look back on stuff, and linguistic. I guess that's how we describe it. It has happened, but life is only ever happening in a now. So I touched on this as well in a Facebook Live that I did recently about relationships actually don't exist as an object. We objectify a relationship. We can say, "Oh, my relationship is like this," but the only thing that's going on is we are relating. And to me, when I look at it like that, that makes it easier to change. It's not like the relationship doesn't exist anyway. It's just that all that's going on is I'm relating to this person in a moment, and I can change that in any moment.
Yes, wonderful. The creative power and freedom in any moment. Wonderful.
Absolutely.
This has been a very rich conversation, and I am touched deeply by what you shared, and I'm sure other people who are watching also. And if someone feels inspired to get in touch with you, either explore what you have to offer in terms of coaching or writing or podcast, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, I love to talk to people. So happy if anybody really, don't hold back, message me. So you can email me. You can find my email address from my website, which is philg.com, philg.com. The website's pretty out of date, but we'll ignore that. And I'm pretty active on Facebook. So that in a way, that's like my preferred method. Like hook up with me, send me a friend request on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook really easy by going to fbphil.com, and that will take you to my profile.
And I will also include the link in the description.
Thank you. Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you, Karolina. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much, Phil.